Boker Tov, good morning. Today is Friday, March 19th, and it's Erev Shabbat Parshat Vayikra. It was Kramer's trademark entrance, literally, on the Seinfeld show, where something would be happening in Jerry's apartment, people would be going about their business, and then Kramer would kind of barge in and just start talking, and it was perfect for the character that he was portraying, and we kind of all smiled knowing that this is an extreme version of sometimes people that we know who are kind of unaware of so much and unattuned to the usual dynamics between people. The parsha this week actually starts off by having us think differently than Kramer in this regard. And the Torah says, Vayikra el Moshe, that God called out to Moshe, Vaydaber Adonai elav me'olam mo'ed lemor, and God spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, and it continues forward. So you have Vayikra, Vaydaber. God called and then spoke. Here there is actually a parallel teaching about not entering without first knocking, basically without being called, not just knocking, about being called to enter. So Moshe is one who's seen to have adopted this on his own accord, and Hashem seemed to concur with that. But the larger statement is that God does not start speaking to Moshe until he first gives an initial call out to him. Don't just start talking. Don't just walk into a room and begin talking. And don't have a conversation with someone without this first step taking place. Here's what the Meiri says. From this text, it was sufficient that it could have just started off by telling us, and God spoke to Moshe, saying, Labmadnu derech eretz. In all the ways that we want to use this phrase, derech eretz is the ways of people, a basic menschlich behavior. That at a time that a person is going to start talking to another person, it is appropriate that you should first call to him, and to let him know that you wish to speak to him. Don't just start. We do know people like that, I imagine, who just start. You're in the middle of a conversation and they kind of unawares do that, or you might be deep in a book, and someone just starts talking to you without sort of saying, "Hey, Chaim Yankel, you have a moment, or I have something I want to talk to you about." That's the Derech Eretz teaching that we have. But this goes further. Beyond the inserting of yourself into somebody else's reality, it goes beyond the fact that no one likes to be surprised, no one wants to be hijacked. Those are all the variations of this first component. That goes beyond the anti-Kramer rule. And this is what the Maharsha says. Elim ken korehu, on this phrase, unless he first calls him, dahainu shekorehu b'shem, ki hacha shekaro Moshe. The point here is more specifically that you call the person by name, as God called Moshe, and then began to speak. There's something here that has to do with the essence of communication. I want to say something to you, and I identify it's you with whom I'm speaking. The tradition actually is that this might have been the case that God did this every single time God spoke to Moshe. He first called him by name. And what do you have here? I think on the one hand you have a statement about self-expression versus communication. I've probably shared with you at other points that when I would teach a bar mitzvah class, the sixth grade boys, seventh grade boys, and I could have a situation in which there are all these kids in a room, and every single one of them is talking. Everyone is talking, and no one's listening. Because they're all just saying what they want to say, and nobody is listening to them at all, because there's something about what they're doing which is actually just letting it out without actually communicating. If they cared about communicating, then they'd find some way to gain somebody else's attention and create some quiet to communicate what they want to communicate. But instead, it's just letting it out. And we know that this is, we're living in a world where this is perhaps more prevalent and dominant than ever, where people just bloviate. I'm using more, that's pretty extreme way to say it, right? People just find themselves a soapbox, digitally certainly, where they just get to say what they want to say. They're going to let it out. Self-expression. And it's good for people to be conscious of what's inside of them, and they want to let it out. But there's a narcissistic side to that, which in certain ways is not even interested in what people are, that people are actually hearing what they're saying, but just simply know that they're hearing them. More likes or whatever other versions of followers that you have on Instagram or TikTok, or on Facebook or whatever the other context, where very, very often you're not actually communicating, not communicating at all. By reminding someone that he must call out to the listener, perhaps by name, you're reminding the person that what they're doing is an act of communication. Not a one-directional experience, but one in which I speak, you receive, and hopefully you communicate back. Communication. There's a commonality in the experience that we're really describing, and that the message of Derech Eretz might be for you to recall that everything being said is being said to another person. That you're communicating, not just self-expressing, and that perhaps you might think once or twice or three times about making the communication be of the importance too, and not just the self-expression. I'll tell you, I'm missing this. I miss the dynamic of communicating with you week to week, where I stand up, and even though I'm the only one talking in the shul when I give a drasha, I do feel that there's a communication experience happening. Whether I call you by name, each one of you in the room, or I make eye contact with you, which might be the equivalent of it, that's something that's strong and powerful, and that intensifies my experience. I have to really stop, think once and again and a third time as I make a recording of a drasha and that look into a camera and then send it over the digital waves. I have to remind myself there's a listener on the other side, and try to imagine for myself who you are and that you're hearing, and that creates the communication once more. We are hungry for that possibility where we can actually do this kind of communication together again. But absent that, we need to be mindful of this teaching and the power of all the engagements that we have, whether it's through a mask or over the phone or through a Zoom with another person on the other side, that you are indeed given the opportunity to share with the other person. And that's the greatest goal. That's the act of a communication indeed. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom, in which we communicate with one another. Bye-bye. Have a good Shabbos.